The Boarding School and Cushman Project, the Puyallup Tribal Language Program. This video was put together by the Puyallup Tribal Language Program to bring awareness to events that transpired on the Puyallup Tribal Reservation. This video is intended to educate our community about the real history that occurred on this land to our people. You will find our history of factual events is much different than the history shared with the general public. We are sharing our story to add to your understanding of our people, coming from our own voices.
O hoialta chas a tis schalatsu go gwalachtwa tis wilsu yaf tis siaya yaf tis shadchas o hoyudas tis Cushman chalalt is o shabab ild a tis gwas pasted.
The Education of the First People of This Land. Written by Zalmai Aswali Zahir. Lushootseed translation by Zalmai Aswali Zahir. Tu gwalt shitab tis skakagwas a tis atzil talbuh. Zuhbid a tis pasted o suchel twal tiswa twiftwad. Huitlap ak. Gwa huitla kaya. Puta was all. Tocht tis bak okwab safo lahid. Tis kalubs. Tis qoladits. Tis baksuds. Tis kadvs. Tis okwabs. Lahidwaf quigwas o kalosubs. Gwalakabj. Lahidwaf tis ka. Lahidwaf halgwa quist oljaf yaf tis stab. Tisaf hali il. Twal quiso hali atahak. Tu lalok elaf tis tu atsil tabu. Lahidwaf halgwa o huit. Gwadaf halis. Chasalt halgwa ata hegwalt atil pai. Chasalali elbid twatil choch yaftil stolak yaftil chacho yaftil so huit yaftil chelech asista ati. Gwalswad huftwad. Olachad tis bak stab twas aslid yaftis klalabats yaftibak stabigs. Ai gwasid. Ati tala o huyud atas olach yafti chilks yaftich awai. Tut la ai gwasid bak dufchad. Gwalak udzak leo twatis o ai gwasids. Dik. Lahid til chach yaf til gwadzarad yaf til dik. O che abab gwala lala olab. Khalad gwa kwashid. Lahidwaf tis o khalad al til achwad yav til o hoyuds atil chach atil atzil talbuh. Lahidwaf tis o tolod tis chal aquis gwa aqui badach o. Al basista la dzak tu atzil talbuh bak duf chad al taswa twiftwad. Gwa hoy gwasaf, gwa yaya bitagwil. Tida fasista h Titus lahaidub tis lali ak buf ucid. Lahaidub of hogwa, fo'ola salats, parats yaftis salats khod. Huit lahak gwa didich tu lahaidub atil tu atsil taubuf til khas khod. Tu til dutch o stobsh kwal gola quad twalta bos dutch akbuf. Sasel as qo at a dutch akbuf twal dutch o staladub. Lahaidofaf tils alalos halgwa yaf tils khods. Hoi gola bakwad twal tibadutch o dutch akbuf. Hui af quigwasas lahaidufs twal quigwasas haidufs. Til bos khod atil dutch akbuf yaf tis alalos halgwa. Tu sutaf si takshablu skajet, tu ochaf si tu skois twal yakama, gwala sasel twal zalachi slokwab, twal tiso lahaiduf tits alkwab. Tu sutaf sil Iola Brayford, buckoshush absh, tu lahaidub asis kois Annie Daniels, til parats yap tisalis khod. O khalot sidab til Leon Metcalf, gwala toshot sidab, gwala tsalkwab, gwala pastadot sidab. Hi, huit la zaklab halgwa. Sayas p'al til atsil tabuh. Gwala as q'ech til so lahaiduf twal til zuf atsil tabuh. Distaf o I abil gwala q'ech. Huit la stab til squats halgwa dafas q'ech. Dabtis o abaleks halgwa atadufas q'echs. Til dafo alalos atil zuf atzatsil tabuh. Hoyaf chas. Gwalapu de Asian, de Siaya Chalup, Amber Sterud Hayward Seed Stop, Spoyala Pobs Chud. Uyayush Chud, Twalti Spoyala Pobs, Altis la olubari, Yapti Twosho Tirari. Good day to you all, my friends and relatives. My name is Amber Sterud Hayward, and I'm a Puyallup tribal member. I work for the Puyallup tribe, formerly in the Historic Preservation Department and currently in the language program. You just watched the Boarding School and Cushman Project, the education of the first people of this land. This video describes the education system of our ancestors who resided in the usual and accustomed areas of Lushootseed country in Washington state. As you saw in the video, our people highly valued the land, the people, other tribes and cultures, and speaking multiple languages. We valued our families, caring for our community, our history, our traditional stories and teachings. Our people still highly value each of these things today. Pre-European contact, there were thousands of native languages spoken across the United States by millions of native speakers. Presently, there are believed to be approximately 175 native tribal languages spoken by approximately 350,000 people, with English still being the predominant language. Can you imagine a time in Tacoma's history when a person could speak up to 15 languages? Probably not. That's because post-European contact, colonizers forced assimilation on our people and forced the English language and culture on our ancestors. Monolingualism and ethnocentrism is highly valued in American history, and we still see the effects of this today. I'd like to broaden our scope and take a peek at the rest of the world as it relates to monolingual, bilingual, and multilingual speakers. There are approximately 379 million English monolingual speakers in the world. English is the predominant language in the United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, Ireland, and the United States, with about 75% of Americans being monolingual. There are about 1.132 billion bilingual English speakers in the world. Did you realize that almost half of the world speaks at least 2 languages? Think about that for a moment. There are several countries in the world that have multiple official languages, including Aruba, Luxembourg, Singapore, Malaysia, India, and South Africa. Multilingual speakers make up about 13% of the world's population. Now let's focus back on the United States. Think back to the values and education system you listened to in this video regarding the native peoples of this land. I'd like to ask you some questions for you to personally reflect on. Where do your ancestors come from? What are your ancestral languages? Do you or your family members speak those ancestral languages? If you don't speak them, think about why you don't. Do you feel that your ancestral language is important to pass on to your children and future generations? Knowing that the first people of this land highly valued multiple languages, how does this compare to American values? Now, I'd like to take some action in your personal life and see how you might start valuing the languages and cultures around you. You can start by recognizing the people you interact with daily who come from different cultures and speak different languages. These people might be your neighbors, co-workers, students, and even family members. Maybe these people are your own parents or grandparents who haven't passed down your ancestral languages to you. If you desire to broaden your knowledge and acceptance of your ancestry and other cultures, begin asking the people in your life about their ancestral languages. You can begin by asking them how to say a few greetings and departure phrases and work on them each time you see them. How do you think those people would feel if you put some effort into speaking their language with them? South African comedian Trevor Noah reportedly speaks 8 different languages, and he states, Nelson Mandela once said, "If you talk to a man in a language he understands, that goes to his head. If you talk to him in his language, that goes to his heart." He was so right. When you make the effort to speak someone else's language, even if it's just basic phrases here and there, you are saying to them, "I understand that you have a culture and identity that exists beyond me. I see you as a human being." End quote. Please know that the full immersion Lushootseed video and this accompanying video has not been arbitrarily put together. Each word, perspective, story, and each question has been chosen very intentionally. This very Puyallup-centric presentation of history was very deliberately compiled to make you see us as human beings who have a story to share. By centering our story right here on our homelands, you have to connect to us through the geography and specific stories shared. We are trying to make it hard for you to disconnect from us. We've all heard the blanket statements regarding the Native American experience in the United States. These blanket statements still allow for you to detach from our stories. We want you to know that these things occurred right here to our people on the Puyallup Reservation in Pierce County, Washington, and the effects of this history still has an impact on our community today. We thank you for your time, and we mostly thank you for considering personally reflecting on this video, the questions, and broadening your awareness for others in your life. Because we all want to be seen as human beings, to be acknowledged, and to be accepted. If you'd like to dig deeper or would like more time to process these concepts and values, please see the accompanying document that goes with this section covering the education of the first people of this land. Oh yeah, we are finished. European Contact in Washington State. Written by Zalmai Uswali Zahir. Lushootseed translation by Zalmai Uswali Zahir. O lala oluba chas atis tu lali akbu tu o slachil twa tis swa tuftwad atis atsatis talbu. Tu slachil tis ka akbu. Assista atis holtub yaftis pas pastid yaftis qoch. Altis parats yaftits oaks zaladub, yaftits oksachi, yaftibos, o olos tis Spaniard, Juan Perez, tu guachub. Go o olos shid tis Spain du eof, alti heg choch, golot I shidaf tis Spain, ataswa twiftwad, o daad tis pasted. Pacific Northwest. Dishti, Oregon, Yufti, Washitub, Yufti, British Columbia. Huaf Lutsuk. Guati tu Sasel, tis tu Atsat, tis Tabuf, alti swa tuftwid, alti zuf to altudi tu hak, zuf bid, a tis so slachel, a tis hequeg suit. Foltub. Huit wasot aishids holgwa, okada. Altis parats yaptits oaks zaladub, yaptits oksachi il. Tu huit elich tis atsat tis tabuf, a tis skotab, golochadzadaf. To altis foltub, tis skotab. Tu khadzadaf tis ka at tis tabuf, zufbid a tis so sachil, a tis foltab twalta choch. Zufbid a tis so sachil, a tis foltab, go huiquid tus kotabich, tis at tis tabuf. Tu elabutaf halgwa. Ska kagwas halgwa, atil swad huftwad. Go to haidafaf as chade, tis as slasels as halit il. Huitwas o dokwildufs halgwa. Tu haidafaf halgwa, tis chas chachab, atil swad huftwad. Gola oshab tadabut holgwa. Gwa tu kluchala lekw. Huit chas la si ab atil swa twiftwad. Skoy chas ti swa twiftwad. Gwa klushaka lekw. Chasla klu hegwa lekw. Hai klu te chech de bus tis swa twiftwad. Dafas halit chas, dafas slasli. Altis parats yaftits oaks, staladub yafti cholachi. Tu chalshitab atis Spain, atis nutka concession, chas chachab dafo ak tis lalit akbuf, twal Pacific Northwest, swa twiftwad. O guachub, o aitwasad. O hoishitab atil chas chachab, daf o ak tis lali akbuf, o quadshid. Altis parats yaftits oaks staladub, yafti cholachi, yafti sali. Tu sacho quas, tis zuf foltab, twalta choch o olos holgwa. George Vancouver titus sta atil siab atil qelbid. British tis. Peter Puget yaf T. Joseph Whidbey tis ilachads. Tu hoyud quas holgwa. Ti zuf sta edup atil choch. O labduf quas holgwa. Til tu chalosab atil atsatsil tabuf. Atil skotab tu khwadzadaf til atsil tabuf. Tu da'atab atil lali akbuf ti washitab. Yaf ti Oregon, yaf ti Idaho, yaf ti Mimuad ata Montana, Oregon country. To til United States, yuf til Great Britain, gwa quislu quadshid. Alta parats yufti takachi zaladub yufti parats yufti takachi. O Khaltab, a Great Britain, yufti United States, til chachachab, a til joint occupation of Oregon. Duff o washaduf ti swa tuftwad, al til spo sachi yufti khol parallel. All til parats yufti takachi spukwachi zaladub yufti parats yufti khol. O Lushootseed, a Spain, til United States, a til swa tuftwad, Pacific Northwest. Tu o taishidas, til tas la sel to al tudi tu hak. All til parats yufti takachi zaladub yufti sali achi yufti bos. O slachel ti zuf twal til daf alchad cholch daf o fuit a til squasab a til titi chalbuf. O yayabitab til at til talbuf daf o kaya tiso quad holgwa til squasab. Tu lahaiduf holgwa gwa quafatab holgwa a til siaya. Gwa hoi o quadshid holgwa til at til talbuf a til hatl glob chach. Khwadzadaf holgwa til titi chalbuf a til swa twiftwad buk duf cha til tus laochs holgwa. Assista a til tsabalkade stachab slachab squiquad baloops. Khwadzad gwala khwadzad gwala khwadzad. All til parats yufti takachi zaladub yufti sali achi yufti tsoks. O chasalt ti foltab a Fort Langley, all til Fraser stolak cheat a til salmon stolak. As qh guatiduf a til tus I guasatab a til at til talbuf twal til guas foltab. Assista as aslid. Saplal blas la pasqui lab assista ati. Yufs klalabats sail peeped yalabsid quote kapo squabshad assista ati. All til parats yufti takachi zaladub yufti slufachi yufti sluf. Chasalt til Hudson Bay Company a ta Fort duf squali al ti duf squali. Dis ti zuf foltabalt o hoyud al ti swa twiftwad a til cholch. Klauba a tiruf a til ba I guasatab a til at til talbuf. All til parats yufti takachi zaladub yufti spo sachi il. Sala ak til to al leo duf tak twal tiso taishid til at til talbuf a til swa twiftwad duf as slaslis. Up holgwa lis all Boston dufo da'atub Boston. Alta Lushootseed to I guasid ti b twal p. Gwal tu I gwasid tn twal d. Altis lachel gwal o twal shot sidab chus posted twal tis buk gwat to all Europe. Altis parats yapti takachi zaladub yapti spo sachi yapti salats. O chasalt tis Michael T. Simmons yaptis George Washington Bush cheat atis taud o daad tumwater altis lachel. Zuf halgwa to altis leo duft Posted tis Michael T. Simmons. Toch squelch tis George Washington Bush. Didich o datab tis spakwab. Tu dafas slasils halgwa. Bush spakwab altis lachel. Altis parats yapti takachi zaladub. Yapti spo sachi. Yapti takachi. O ched, o hoyo tis Oregon Territory, a tis United States. Dis ti Oregon yapti Washatub. Al tis parats yapti takachi zaladub yapti spo sachi yapti chol. O chasalt tis United States Army, a tis qalachad. Talquab. Altis parats yapti takachi zaladub yapti salatsachi yapti shliuf. Ohoyu tis Washatub Territory. Altis parats yapti takachi zaladub yapti salatsachi yapti bos. O chetub tis Shwananam Treaty. O kleldub a tis atsis tabuf, tis sali million acres, yafti chachgwas. O ala dakatub suf a tis pasted, gwa abshidas, tis atsis tabuf, a tis reservation. Gwa su fwit al tis swa tuftwad, buk duf chad, tu ala los defo fwit. To parats yapti takachi zaladub, yapti salatsachi, yapti salats, twa parats yapti takachi zaladub, yapti salatsachi, yapti zalachi. Tu hoi yabok tis atsis tabuf, yapti posted. Altis parats yapti takachi zaladub, yapti takachi achi, yapti chol. Tu hoyo tis Washatub Territory, a tis spo sachi, yapti sali state, a tis United States. Hoy chas. Twa Gwalapu de Asia, de CIA Chalup. Amber Sterud Hayward Seed Stat. Spoyala Pobs Chud. Uyayush Chud, Twaltis Spoyala Pobs, Altis Lala Olubadi, Yapti Twashot Sidadi. Good day to you all, my friends and relatives. My name is Amber Sterud Hayward, and I am a Puyallup Tribal member. I work for the Puyallup Tribe, formerly in the Historic Preservation Department, and currently in the Language Program. You just watched the Boarding School Cushman Project, European Contact in Washington State. This video describes the events that transpired in Lushootseed country in Washington State as European explorers came in contact with our ancestors and a timeline of events that followed. This video is written from the perspective of our people, from our viewpoint. This is not the viewpoint that is commonly shared and taught regarding Washington State history. While Native voices have vocalized our discontent over this one-sided view, the posted or Caucasian version of Washington state history is still used. For example, Washington state natives have endorsed the since time immemorial tribal sovereignty in Washington state curriculum to begin changing this perspective of Washington state history. In 2015, the legislature passed Senate Bill 5433, requiring this curriculum be taught in all schools. Yet not all school teachers are using the curriculum to assist in changing this narrative. My family and I live on the Puyallup Reservation, and my children attend the local public schools. While finishing up this past school year during quarantine, I was helping my son with his middle school history assignments. We watched videos and read about settlers entering into Lushootseed territory. To my complete shock and dismay, the same posted perspective was still being taught from when I was in school 30 years ago. This perspective includes painting the posted settlers as pioneers seeking a new life, acquiring land, and building a name for themselves. These materials continue to paint our ancestors as savages, aggressors, murderers, or uneducated heathens who were easily manipulated. But the manipulation, robbing, and slaughtering of our people is usually brushed over or not talked about at all. This is a narrative that we are tired of hearing. This is the narrative that has been in history books for centuries. This is the narrative that generation after generation have been fed, which has led to the dehumanization of Native people across the United States. This is the narrative that has captured the American dream at the expense of Native lives and exploitation of natural resources. To change this presentation of Washington state history, the other side of the story must be shared. This cannot come from old documents recorded by posted settlers. It will not come from posted Washington state historians. It will not come from academic papers. The other side of this narrative has to come from the first people of this land and the original natives that lived here in Lushootseed country. We can share our side, but our version also must be received. To be received, those listening must be open to the idea that what has been presented to us our whole lives might be incorrectly portrayed with pieces of the story missing. To help with this shift, let's focus back to the video you just watched. Think about the version that was presented in the voices of the first people. I'd like to ask a few questions for you to personally reflect on. Is it important to know both sides and perspectives of an event? Why or why not? Should the truth be shared about historical events, even if it causes discomfort and pain to hear? How did you feel hearing and reading Washington state history from the perspectives of the first people of this land? What were some of the things that you noticed from this perspective versus the perspective that is typically shared in Washington state history? If your community was dominated, taken over, displaced, and the natural resources around you were exploited, how would you feel if your side of this historic event was inaccurately represented for hundreds of years? Please know that the full immersion Lushootseed video and the accompanying video has not been arbitrarily put together. Each word, perspective, story, and each question has been chosen very intentionally. This very Puyallup-centric presentation of history was very deliberately compiled to make you see us as human beings who have a story to share. By centering our story right here on our homelands, you have to connect to us through geography and specific stories shared. We are trying to make it hard for you to disconnect from us. We've all heard the blanket statements regarding the Native American experience in the United States. These blanket statements still allow for you to detach from our stories. We want you to know that these things occurred right here to our people on the Puyallup Reservation in Pierce County, Washington, and the effects of this history still has an impact on our community today. We thank you for your time, and we mostly thank you for considering personally reflecting on this video, the questions, and broadening your awareness for others in your life, because we all want to be seen as human beings, to be acknowledged, and to be accepted. If you'd like to dig deeper or would like more time to process these concepts and values, please see the accompanying document that goes with this section covering European contact in Washington State. txʷəls, we are finished. St. George's Indian Boarding School, Cushman Indian Boarding School, Cushman Indian Hospital and Sanatorium, Puyallup Reservation. Written by Amber Sterud Hayward. Lushootseed translation by Zalmai Aswili Zahir. Abziayusadi Tish Spoyalapabj O Da'ad Historic Preservation. O Olachad Tish Slala Olub Yaftish Genealogy Yaftish Spak Yaftish Alalos Atish Zuf Atsish Tabuf Gwala Khadid Duflala Olb Tsi Tu Judy Wright Twal Tish Ishads Sai Tas As Sadai Tsish Gwal Tu Lach Dufaf Tish Siatsab Atish Tu Ishadchas Sabalala Olb To Khaltab, to Judy Wright, to Cushman, all, twal tis Puyallup squapad, to Ceab, al tis Sali achi spakwachi zaladub yaftida cho. To Khalaut tiis, gohoy, to Khasalt, Shatob Shadad, gohoy, to Khasalt Atis Skotab Tok Obali Gohoy to Skelk Alek Alt Ashalug Lugwab Gohoy to Siayusadi Atis Spoyalapabj Hi Sulat Labad Chas Tisiatsab Atis Cushman Gulastabaf Titus Hois Twal Ka Zaladub Tu hoyu ti Dutch o di adi khalaut twal atzil tabuf wiotsu alta swa tuhtwed atas spoyalapabj. Tu atzats altiduf akt sali achi yafti khol shugs yafti Portland Avenue shugs alta sala sali. Tu a tish salalats wiotsu. Alta parats yafti takachi zaladub yafti zalachi achi yafti tsoks. O Khaltab, Alta Secretary of Interior Commissions Khal, Hal Tiso Hoyal Atish Cushman Khalaut. O Khal, Ash Tish Slahoyal Ata Khalaut. Alta Puyallup, O Yayus Bitab a Siab spinning. Huas Ka Tala Toch Quadub a Tish Dufgwaltshid Tish Wiotsu To Al Tish Yalabs Gwal O Qalt Gwal O Klalabatsad. Abil Gwa I Abil Qui Khalaut Ata atzil tabuf, yaut gwakwada tish wiotsu to al tichach a tish yalabs holgwa, leo gwasad tish as chachash, to al tish as lokil. Tu chasalt ata sali khaledup dufus qalb khalaut. A tish cheat ata sasali achi wiotsu titus ochs lahaiduf halgwa o kwashadas o khaladas. Hoi gwal o yayus halgwa alta khalaut swat huftwad. O shabab ild halgwa. Kalabtis athlids golo khalil ti wiotsu. to Gakatab Tis Shugs Atis St. George's Boarding Chalaut Altiswa Twiftwood a Puyallup. Dafogwot Sheetab Tis Atsis Talbufuiotsu a Tis Pastid Squaditsu Yuf Tis Squalshuds Yuf Tis Alalos a Tis Alls. Tu klu atub tis tak kachi achi will to a slope a ti zalachi a lot of 12 parats a lot of yafti zalachi a lot of heg will do fuff ti slif chaledub chalaut a St. George's gwilla chasalt a ta is ka all tis swat twiftwoods. Tebit suit tis pasted ceab twatiso pastidildub tis atsis talbuf buk duf chad all tis United States. Safwub tis atsis talbuf wheel to all tis ciayats. Gwala ad alta chalaut gwas tis pasted de food chasad tis alalos a tis ishads yaf tis ciayats to all tis wheel to tis so pastadildubs duf o alalos a tis chalaut Putaf o ches chachab, tortiso chwadzatab, tis so alalos, a tis wiotsu, yaf tis chod, a tis ishads. Tilaf le klachaf, tis du qalb, chalaut, to a quimimu adalt, twa hek. Gwal tu safwab tis kas bakwachi will to a buk duf chad all to northwest yuf tis Alaska. Chasa south all a tis asadari yuf ti chalaut yuf ti qalbalt a tis sto tobobsh. Bada'ad tis chalaut at a Cushman Indian chalaut dafo hegwood tis stobsh Francis W. Cushman Guatio chech twa huiquaso tuckads tis chalaut al tiparats yafti chos bakwachi zaladub yafti takachi. O tuckad ti Cushman chalaut, gwa ti huitla tala, gwa huitla eklo wiotsu. Lockbead a tis o tuck, ti chalaut, o hoyo ti chasalt, twa tis tob shadad, a World War I. Alta lockbead a taparats yafti chos bakwachi, Zaladub, yafti sali achi, yafti da chop, gwa a ti spo sachi, all, yafti sali, alta tu chalaut, swa twiftwad. O kwe ad, tis United States ceab, o tuckad ti Cushman chasalt, golo kwatab tis tob shadad, a World War I, twa tis chasalt, al tiduf eachi. Lockbead a tis o tuck, a tis tob shadad chasalt, bagak atab a tis Bureau of Indian Affairs, dufo quebild, tis atsis tabuf, a tis northwest, at skotab, tok obali. Altidzirf Zalt Zaladum O Alek Tis BIA agents Atis Il Ka Tot Oaks Spakwachi Alta Cushman. Gwolo Quebildub Tis Atisas Khas Alta Cushman. Atis Il Ka Tot Sali Achi Spakwachi Atsil Tabuf Alta Khasalt. Was Il Ka Wio Tsu Gwolo Shitab Tis Wio Tsu. To Tukatub Tis St. George's Indian Boarding Khalalt Alta du Aledu at Puyallup Swa Twiftwood Kwati Hwastala. O Chasalt at Saut Chasalt Gwala A Tis Zalachi Khaledup. Lahaidub at Is Hek at Sis Tabu Chasalt Alti United States. I guasid ti chasalt go cho squotab toko bali ti so quebild cheat at sali achi spakwachi ti so quebild o que a tis Department of Health, Education and Welfare o tucka ti chasalt. Hoya chas. Gualapu de Asia, de Siaya Chalup, Amber Sterud Hayward Seed Stat, Spoyala Pobs Chud. Uyayush Chud, Twatis Spoyala Pobs, Altis Lala Olubadi, Yapti Two Shot Siradi. Good day to you all, my friends and relatives. My name is Amber Sterud Hayward, and I'm a Puyallup Tribal member. I work for the Puyallup Tribe, formerly in the Historic Preservation Department and currently in the Language Program. You just watched the Boarding School and Cushman Project, a timeline of events at St. George's Indian Boarding School, Cushman Indian Boarding School, and Cushman Indian Hospital and Sanatorium. This video describes the events that transpired on the Puyallup Tribal Reservation in Washington State during the assimilation of Indian children throughout the boarding school era. This also includes a timeline of events that transpired on the property over the years. Before we discuss local assimilation, I'd like to broaden our scope and take a peek at the rest of the world as it relates to these practices. Assimilation is the process in which a culture group is absorbed into a dominant culture group, whether it be by force or undertaken voluntarily. The goal is to have the minority culture group take on the cultural practices, languages, food, and religious beliefs of the dominant group. European colonizers used forced assimilation on indigenous people across the globe throughout history. These frequent colonization attempts were common in North and South America, Africa, Australia, and Asia. Colonizers used many of these same methods on these continents that included religious conversions, forced removal of children, taking community property and dividing it up into individual parcels of land for ownership, undermining community economies, and removing indigenous food sources. However, colonizers' forced assimilation attempts are rarely successful. It is uncommon for the colonizers' cultural practices to be accepted completely by the indigenous groups. Forced assimilation is rarely successful, but it does have incredibly negative and harmful effects on the targeted group. Keep this information in mind. Let's focus back locally. Forced assimilation was happening across the United States in the late 1800s, taking thousands of Indian children from their parents and forcing them into government or religious boarding schools. Children were also being removed from their parents and adopted out to white families at alarming rates. The goal was to take the children from the influences of their culture and language and force white culture, values, religion, and language on our Native children. This forced assimilation practice happened right here in Tacoma, Washington, on the Puyallup Reservation. When I worked in the Puyallup Tribe's Historic Preservation Department, I would go out and share the tribe's history with non-natives. The majority of people that I spoke with had no idea there were 2 boarding schools right here on the Puyallup Reservation. However, many do recall seeing the huge brick Indian hospital that was visible from I-5 as people drove through Tacoma. Many of these people would ask, why don't I know about these boarding schools? That's a really good question. So let's pause there and think about that. For those of you watching, if this is new information for you, why do you think you didn't know about the boarding schools located on the Puyallup Reservation? Why is this timeline of events not taught or quickly brushed over in Washington state history? This was a horrific timeline of events that happened in American history that were intended to stay hidden. Our stories and perspectives are not shared widely because our people were traumatized and stripped of everything that was important to us in attempts to destroy us. As described earlier, assimilation practices do not completely work on the target group, but much harm is done to the people in the process. By us sharing this very information with you, we get to reveal the truth behind the very script that was devised to hide this history. Sharing helps our people to identify, process, and heal so that we can move forward. Sharing also puts our words, experiences, and our perspective of these events into the history books. Our intent for this section of this video is to remove the blanket statements regarding countrywide assimilation and focus your eyes on Tacoma, Washington. By doing this, we are making you connect through location and geographical landmarks. If you've driven down I-5 past the current Emerald Queen Casino or past the Puyallup River, you are connecting to the land and the location that these boarding schools were located by. The intent of this video is to have you see us as human beings and not turn away and say these things happen somewhere else. These things happen right here, and we want to acknowledge that. Being aware of what transpired on the very land that you and I live on is incredibly valuable to begin healing the damage that was done, moving past the grief and pushing forward to understanding and reconciliation. Please know that the full immersion Lushootseed video and this accompanying video has not been arbitrarily put together. Each word, perspective, story, and each question has been chosen very intentionally. We want you to know that these things occurred right here to our people on the Puyallup Reservation in Pierce County, Washington, and the effects of this history still has an impact on our community today. We thank you for your time, and we mostly thank you for considering personally reflecting on this video, the questions, and broadening your awareness for others in your life, because we all want to be seen as human beings, to be acknowledged, and to be accepted. If you'd like to dig deeper or would like more time to process these concepts and values, please see the accompanying document that goes with this section covering the timeline of events at St. George's Indian Boarding School, Cushman Indian Boarding School, and Cushman Indian Hospital and Sanatorium. We are finished.
Stories from students, patients, and staff. St. George's Indian Boarding School, Cushman Indian Boarding School, Cushman Indian Hospital and Sanatorium, Puyallup Reservation. Written by Amber Sterud Hayward. Lushootseed translation by Zalmai Aswali Zahir. Olala olubaf chas ata Cushman. Huitlabak stab tis hat siatsab golo oshabab ildub atis Cushman tis ka atsis tabuch. Huitlakea tis siatsab toch asqh quatis lala olb atis ka atsis tabuch yaftis pasted Yaftis is quok to Yayus al to Cushman. Hui quis hat chall quiguas balets. Hi o chutch to bootlid chall, tebit sutaf chilup. Hek tar chutch. Huigwads as challal chutch de boot, o shabab de fil de boot. Huigwads abshidaf, teeth club, o shabab ild atads walach. Huiaf gwads o huishid, atidaf o tsalalex. Gwala assista, gwallu hek suit, chal tal atzil tabiuf, atil gwal schorchod chal. Lushootseed yaftil ala los chal. Hi o lala olubaf chal. Atil Cushman atis chorchod o tebit sutaf twatiso Lushootseed shitab chal. Amber sterut Hayward seed stat. Spoyalapabs chud yaftis salish. Olala olub chud atil Cushman. Tu yayus chud altas lala olb ali atil spoyalapabs twa cheat ataparats zaladub as qo atsi tu Judy right. Duf lala olb atil chal. Altids la yayus, altis la olb ali, o quatla lek chud atas la olb a Cushman. O bekwe tub chud at see to Judy right, at tids o gwed, tis lok, to all buck duf chad all to United States, to all to Cushman chalaut, all to Cushman chalaut. Ka atzatzil tabiuf tidzo chod bid. O kwe ad tub shogwa altisab chod. O up hogwa twa tid siayusari. O zalacha bid chad hogwa altis alls. O suit tis quiquad. Qui tus o yatsubs hogwa twa quiguat. Tis yatsub tidzo chod bid al tis lachel go to a tis tas chod a tis to a al to Cushman o chod bidad. Tas chod a tis o och twa te chalaut. Yaftil fus chal atil chalaut yaftil tu yayus al to Cushman. Putaf od so til lok o tatabub chal. Glob chad gwa ched ti siatsubs hogwa o gwasadad. O bekwe tub chal atil buk tsadil. A quigwa siatsub chal, a til so siatsub tubuls hogwa. Af suit til quiquad sadil, huitla as qh ti siatsubs. Toch al ti so dubshad chal ti buk siatsubs hogwa. Hoil chal as sof tash til siatsubs. To a til du qalb khalaut alta fife, gwal St. George's Indian Boarding khalaut titu stats. Al tidzo quaslad o chod bichad ti dudj o stobsh to a alta St. George's gwal dil tiso sots. Tu glu tsots til sisters. O wili is chad qui luds lidos. O wili is chad qui luds lidos. Tu klutquapad. Guasa alektab shawio tu twaquiguas gulalds. Tu cluchafatab tilwio tu ofasel a tilpid. Gwal cluchagwilduf ebasht. Zaloch a til de adi. A slidabats a til sagwidats ata as fasel. O chod bichad si dudj o sladai tu a alta Cushman chalalt. O suit sabake alti egg sali guati fuiquaso loads. Suit Sayaf Kalub. Altiso klachads tish badadas. Fue quiguas tuckads shashugs alta alls. Alice guahadeo alta guadelalt o gak tishugs. Sutaf sibadach o sladai tu baalaf ata Cushman chalalt. Sayaf o pastadildub atil Cushman chalalt. Gualadilaf put lup alel debut altis laklachads til badadas. O ched til badadas. Cholab atil tu chetubs atil chalalt. Putaf klu hatlid til alls. Go il hatl til pets. Go slut abus atil tala ilts. Ad si dudjo tuds haiduf. Tu klu ebush altil shugs ali atil Puyallupabsh siayu salt. O quadachibus alti lockbeads. Al Dutch os lache od su. Klu hoi assista guati tu klu ebash assista alta Cushman chalalt. Kleo af shawiotsu alta slach guala tebutsu twaguas elagwils. Alta lelod sha labochad til chalalt. Klu quadub halgwa gualabokt. Saba abshitab til wio tu atil siayayas atil abadab. Klu abshitab til wio tu to'o Alaska ata khus ata quadis. Klau ba'ab shitab ti wio tu ati quagwab dalislad. Gwagwa kwashitab halgwa ashas khal yafsha tala yafshas abadab atil yalabs. Toch fui guaslas quadfs halgwa. Guati fui guaslas ab shitab atil suf yayus a Cushman. O petit guasab halgwa, as ched quida fui guaso chal shitabs atil siayayas. Ab suf cha'a til wio tu klu ab tagwil. A til be bada yaf ti pish. Yaftis kobai gwa klu da'ad halgwa. Klu quadshitab atadacho to all ti badacho atasaf cha'a gwa hui gwa so kalabils halgwa. Tu klu och halgwa twalta quadit sudalt abil Catholic gwa abil Protestant. Lachequitab til wiotsu twaquigwas quahab atalapli usha Protestants. Clula labad halgua shas khalatsut alta auditorium go cluhoya lake. Tu ka tis lali di adi all alta khasalt o da'ad halgua wards. Ward A ti'is twa tis stobs wiotsu. Ward B ti'is twa tis stobs luglugwub. Ward C ti'is twa tis wiotsu as khas gwa o hali il dub. Ward D ti'is twa tis putaf as khas wiotsu tilab tiso hali il dubs. Dis ti wiotsu od salabats yaftis sus quich itabs yaftis as khas atiso taq dubs. Ward E tiis twa tis sadai wiotsu. Tilab qualach aptab tis wiotsu Altiso sludgils halgwa khalab atis pasted tob shudded. Klu ko halgwa atis wiotsu twatis so quichi tubs alta qayok tonsillectomies yaptis skotab tok obali. Gwasachab tis wiotsu twatis o tuts. Gwahwit gwaso chorchod ati quiquad wiotsu. O chorchod bichad si nurse tu yayus alta chasalt. Sutaf tu talchtab tis dapas chas. Twatiso kwasa lex atis so chedfs. Atil saf o hali ils. Tu khalat suit beat hogwa yaftil daf as khas qual o dugwad al til saf as o alis. Tu yayus til ka nurses alta khasalt qual o lahaiduf qual o saut. Huitla ka nurses. O Chelech Halgwa Altis World War II. Tol Buk Dufchad Tis Nurses Assista a Germany Yaf France Gwa Ahaf Tis Atsis Talbuf Nurses. Tu Chetab a Tis Occupational Therapist Tis Wiotsu Atil shag go chokod go quadachi go khalad. Kluhoyutab atil wiotsu til sali stabigs. Kluhoyub a shadacho go quad halgwa shabadacho. Atidacho as khas. Gwo a altis pets gwala chetzelab. Hoyo ti is hats lakbid atis lahaidufs tis so hoyuds quish hoyus. O chorchod bidchad ti bada atadacted tu yayus alta chasalt. Suit. Labak itab atil bads til wiotsu atil qayoqs bak slachel. Bequetab atil bads gwalat labadas til so quichids lisal til fula busad shags atil quich adi. A til wiotsu gwol o llugl til yalabs twa hak. Challal chach halgwa. Gwati hui gwas klabots halgwa as ched tidaf o llugl til yalabs at a hak. Klaba tube til lali wiotsu a til o hali eldub to a til eshads. Sabahak tis a til wiotsu alta chasalt gwa hui gwa so softash halgwa til yalabs o akt. Slalak al halgwa a til siayayas a tiso tokos. Gwasla chek abid til ashads yof til globe nurses alta Cushman. Sutaf til tsauk. Shala ochtub halgwa twalta chasalt gwala quichid til tonsils gwa aslid ata schasab gwala tokt. Chek bitab atil sufyayus ata Cushman til wiotsu to all Alaska yaf Navajo. Huitgwa so pastorot sidabs halgwa ata hatl gwala chetz ilaf. Huitgwa so haidob atil Alaskan atsil tabufs chad quigwas och atil badadats altiso quadubs atiso hali ilduf. Lala och twa Cushman chasalt gwal lala och til il quok twalta chasalt alta Oregon. Abil gwa atabad sha Alaskan atsil tabuf alta Cushman chasalt gwalo pudtub halgwa alta skayuhali a Puyallupabj altiduf a as qalachadich. Huitgwa so yatsabtub til siaya atil badas o ata buk patab. Gwa a til balali gwa huit latala twa quigwas tokts til ski kayu. Al ti Dutch o slache o such al ti Dutch o Alaska siaya twa tid siayu sadi. Gwa o wele quates gwa haidufud gwa patabas sil siayas alta Puyallupabj skayu hali. Tu atabud alta Cushman. Aidufshid chad halgwa at sil tu siayas alta skayu hali. Hoi shidaf halgwa sil tu siayas atil chakla. Gwa o global debut ti siayaya atisas haidufs chad tiso puds. Kludzalacha bitagwil halgwa altil squats di adis alta Cushman gwa yaya bitagwil halgwa twa buk as hali. Talchadaf halgwa til earphone radios gwa tatabab halgwa chalab atil saf khod. Quashitagwalaf halgwa atas khal alta flop butlid lis al ta chalab. Gwasa shadzal debut halgwa gwala hadeo zufbid atiso hayads. Ads kudtub ataka atsil tabuf til east til chugwash alta Cushman. Bulkwaf Til ka at sil tabiuf twa Cushman, twa siayus a nurses, duf hat lead, duf all da leeled, a sista a tea. Ahaf til skayu quas alta Cushman, gualas che. Lab de fraf halgwa, la zach, shasaf guadil, guala gakad, guala takad ti elevator, gualod fraf halgwa shawio tsu o talawil al tashugs ali. Tsutaf til ka at sil tabiuf, huigwas baochs twa til doctored, twa til dentist, Lockbead a Cushman chasalt, autis la loc ills. Guati lach de pap halgua, ti so ched tubes all Cushman. Each eid, salad, ether, needles, stoljaf, so dolch, x-rays, a-hill, bib chagwil, cod liver schus, chagwild alta tibu, assista ati. O chasal chach qui quiquad at sil tabiuf, ati so bake ti Cushman all. Guala ahaf til as chasal chach, as cheche ati so box, Twalta all, altiso loc ills halgwa. Tas chod atil o och, twalta chalaut, yaftil dafas chal, atil chalaut, yaftil tu yayus alta Cushman. Huiquis chak chal, quiguas balets. Hoyaf chas.
Twa Gualapu de Isha de Siaya Chalup. Amber Sterud Hayward Seed Stat. Spoyalapabs Chud. Uyayush Chud, Twaltis Spoyalapabs, Altis Lala Olubadi, Yaptito Shot Siradi. Good day to you all, my friends and relatives. My name is Amber Sterud Hayward, and I am a Puyallup Tribal member. I work for the Puyallup Tribe, formerly in the Historic Preservation Department and currently in the Language Program. You just watched stories from students, patients, and staff, St. George's Indian Boarding School, Cushman Indian Boarding School, and Cushman Indian Hospital and Sanatorium. This video shares the first-hand stories from those who experienced living, working, and attending the boarding schools and Indian Hospital on the Puyallup Reservation in Pierce County, Washington. In the previous video, we went over a timeline of events that transpired in U.S. history during the assimilation of Indian children. In this video, you're hearing stories from our people about what happened to them during this time. I'd like to walk you through a personal reflection exercise that I hope will help you to envision the pains that our people endured during this time of assimilation. These pains have been felt through each generation since the boarding school era up until today. I'd like you to please imagine living in your current home with your family. One day, a government agent knocks on the door and demands the release of your children, or you will be taken to jail for not cooperating. You and your children are screaming and crying, not knowing what is happening, and the children are forcibly removed by the agent. You don't know exactly where your children are going, and you were told that they were going to a boarding school 4 hours away from your home. You did not get a return date. This happened to all of the children in your neighborhood, and all of the families are distraught. You soon learn that your children could be gone for several years, and the government will notify you of a possible return date. Sometime later, you learn where your children are located, but you are unable to visit or communicate with them. You also learn that your children are kept in a childlike military-style prison. Their physical appearances are being altered, including boys and girls getting their hair shaved completely bald, and they have to wear military-issued clothing. You also learn that your children are forbidden to speak English and they are severely punished for doing so. They are being taught an unfamiliar religion and being stripped of their Christian beliefs. They are given food that their bodies cannot process and are unhealthy for them. They are being taught in an unconventional learning model that they have never been exposed to, and you cannot see how this learning style is going to benefit them because it's completely opposite of how your children presently learn. You wonder who your children are with and if they are being treated okay. These thoughts are driving you crazy. Your children are being emotionally abused by the adults running the school. Your children are being physically intimidated and physically abused. Some children are being sexually abused in the facility. Some of the children are demonstrating this learned behavior on each other. Your children are not okay. Your children are being traumatized, every part of them. Everything that you've poured into your children, your values, your family history, your culture, your beliefs, everything you value, your children are being told is completely incorrect and wrong. And one day, 2 years later, your children return home. How does this make you feel envisioning this happening to your family? Can you imagine what an experience like this would do to your community? What are some of the ways you and your family would cope with these traumatic experiences? What would it do to the generations to come? I'm trying to get you to process and feel a sliver of what our people had to endure and acknowledge that it did indeed transpire right here in Tacoma, Washington. This happened to the people who resided on this land since the beginning of time. The American disconnect happens when something like this couldn't happen to you. It doesn't directly affect you, and it didn't happen to your ancestors. For those of you listening and watching right now, please know that decades ago, when these interviews were conducted, our elders spoke of you specifically. You were the intended audience. Many elders told me specifically, you better do something with these stories. You need to share these stories. People need to know what happened to us. Our people wanted you to know what transpired here on the Puyallup Reservation. These experiences affected these people and their entire lives. These experiences affected these people's parents, their children, their grandchildren, and their communities. Please do not forget what you learned when you think about our people, when you see our people, when you talk to our people, when you speak to others about our people. We would like to extend our gratitude to the families who shared their stories with us. These short stories were hard for our elders to share. Many of these memories were pushed down deep inside. But these courageous elders felt these stories were important enough to share, and they had hopes that their words would be heard, their experiences felt. Some expressed that their stories were not important or relevant. However, as we went along, we found that many of the same things happened to others, and when all of their stories were woven together, we saw patterns. Some elders said they hadn't told another soul about their experience here on our reservation. We don't take one story for granted. We'd like to honor each story and all the stories that went unheard. We want to honor each family that was affected by what happened on our reservation and each of the following generations that followed. I would like to honor the people who were brought to our reservation, whether it be by force or medical need. While we can't say every child's name who attended, we can say the name of their people. We do this to honor and raise our hands to each life that was affected by these schools and Indian Hospital. Please keep in mind that the documents kept regarding our people were recorded by non-natives, and sometimes derogatory or general terms were used to describe tribal affiliation. We do not wish to offend any tribal community, and we will do our best to recognize the communities that we are aware of. We will start with the farthest tribes first. Alaskan Natives, Inupiat and Yupik. These native relatives were referenced as Alaskan Indians or Eskimo, a term that the first people do not use to reference themselves. Haida Nation, Tlingit Nation, Aleut people. First Nations natives from Canada. These First Nation natives relatives were referenced as Canadian Indians, BC Indians, and Yukon Indians. Now we will honor our relatives east to west, starting with the Pequot Tribal Nation, Seneca Nation of Indians, Shawnee Tribe, Muskogee Creek Nation, and the Cherokee Nation, the Great Sioux Nation, Navajo Nation, Fort Peck Assiniboine Sioux Tribes, Cheyenne Nation, Crow Tribe, Chippewa Cree Tribe, Gros Ventre Tribe, Blackfeet Nation, and the Salish Tribe, Ute Indian Tribe, Shoshone Bannock Tribes, Shoshone Paiute Tribes, Nez Perce Tribes, Coeur d'Alene Tribe, Washoe Tribe, Hoopa Valley Tribe, Shasta Indian Nation, and Pitt River Tribe, Paiute Tribes, Klamath Tribes, Coos Tribe, Siletz Tribe, Rogue River Tribe, Grand Ronde, Umatilla, Walla Walla, Cayuse, Warm Springs, and Wasco Tribe. For our Washington relatives, we will list them starting east of the mountains and then farthest traveling by water. Kalispell, Spokane, Colville, Yakima, Nooksack, Lummi, Upper Skagit, Swinomish, Tulalip, Snohomish, Cowlitz, Chehalis, Quinault, Quileute, Macaw, Lower Elwha Clallam, Jamestown Sklallam, Port Gamble Sklallam, Skokomish, Suquamish, Duwamish, Snoqualmie, Muckleshoot, Squaxin Island, Nisqually, and Puyallup. I would also like to honor each tribe and person that attended these schools or hospital that we did not list, as we do not want to leave anyone out. Asquadi tabusid chasba gwalapu si'ab. Asboot boot lachi bi tabusid chas. We are praisingly grateful to each and every one of you. We lift our hands to you with gratitude. Please know the full immersion Lushootseed video and this accompanying video has not been arbitrarily put together. Each word, perspective, story, and each question has been chosen very intentionally. This very Puyallup-centric presentation of history was very deliberately compiled to make you see us as human beings who have a story to share. By centering our story right here on our homelands, you have to connect to us through geography and specific stories shared. We are trying to make it hard for you to disconnect from us. We've all heard the blanket statements regarding the Native American experience in the United States. These blanket statements still allow for you to detach from our stories. We want you to know that these things occurred right here to our people on the Puyallup Reservation in Pierce County, Washington, and the effects of this history still has an impact on our community today. We thank you for your time, and we mostly thank you for considering personally reflecting on this video, the questions, and broadening your awareness for others in your life. We want to all be seen as human beings, to be acknowledged and to be accepted. If you'd like to dig deeper or would like more time to process these concepts and values, please see the accompanying document that goes with this section covering stories from students, patients, and staff, St. George's Indian Boarding School, Cushman Indian Boarding School, and Cushman Indian Hospital and Sanatorium. Hoya chas, we are finished.
Interview with Rhoda Ducharme Hayward, Salish, the minimization of language and culture through boarding schools. Written by Amber Sterud Hayward. Lushootseed translation by Zalmai Aswili Zahir. Amber Sterud Hayward Seedstat. Spoyalapab Chud Yaftis Salish. Olala Olab Chud Atis Cushman. Alti tudzayus, alti duflala olubadi, o quashid chud tisiatsub atis Cushman, chud alach dewaf, tu och tsi tudkaya twa Cushman. Tudkaya ti tsaf oyayus alta Cushman. O yutsub tub si tud kaya, a ti tu ochs, twa Cushman, hoi chera o yutsub tubulid, a ti so yutsubs. O wali'i si tud kaya, al te sali achi, yafti salats, a te slokwab, a te pach'aab, al te parats, yafti chos bakwachi, zaladub, yafti slifwachi. O wali'i si tud kaya, al te Montana, al te swa tuftud, a te flathead at sil talbuf. Salish at sil talbuf tsi'il. Lucille Pablo Ducharme si tus kois, Salish at sil talbuf tsi'il. Altil skoyaligwads, Anastasia Pablo si tu kayas, Salish at sil talbuf tsi'il. Alexander Pablo ti tu tsapas, Klal basalish at sil talbuf ti'il. Frank Wilbur Ducharme ti tu bads, Salish at sil talbuf ti'il. All tis badaligwads, Emerance Finley si tu kayas, Salish at sil talbuf ti'il. Frank Ducharme Sr. ti tu tsapas, Klal basalish at sil talbuf ti'il. Tub so kwa si tud kaya, Frank Ducharme ti tu stas. Il teso ti so kwas, ata sali alarf. O wali'i halgwa gwal o klach al ti swa tuftud ata flathead. Tu sasasel halgwa al ta Polson, Montana. Alti tu khulalarf si tud kaya, tu chachash, gwal tu sasel al tis Flathead Reservation al tis Montana. Tsub, a BIA agent, si tud kaya, yaft si tu pos. Tu qabai at si tu pos. Hoi gwal tub halgwa twa Cushman. Altis la halgwa, o gwa klalad alti tapanish, gwa tu slugs halgwa, sadacho chachash. Tu tis lali wiotsu to all buk dufchad swa twiftwood, to all Alaska, yafti Washitub, yafti Idaho, yafti Montana, yafti Oregon. Tu chab tis lali wiotsu, toch huikwaso chab at si tud kaya. Tu klulotub at tis wiotsu tis yalabs, gwa tu kluhoi. Huikwaso wele halgwa. Cho tu hoi halgwa, stab tiso sutubs halgwa. O wele kwechad, o ched kwadaf o och. Odsut halgwa, o kotab ata tok o bali, tochaf, sut sil tud kaya, huikwas as chals, gwa huikwas as chalabs. Huaf gwas o kotabs, huikwis o kwichitabs, cho o buk tub atil cod liver chwas buk slachel. Buk slachel, gwa tu klut ad sutaf halgwa, gwa klu labdub at sil nurses atil qayok halgwa, gwa klu eqwadib halgwa, gwa klu ogwotab halgwa atil sas kwalabats. Altil Cushman, gwa atil lalit gwas ward. Atil bos all. Sali twa til stobobsh, gwa sali twa til slasadite. Tu atil ward A, yaf T ward B, yuf T word C, yuf T word D. Abil gwachas chafwasasil aquidach a alt. Toch abil cho chafgwachechas chafwasasil aquibadach a alt. Tu sasil tsi tudkaya alta ward D. Tu sasil twadach o zaladub. Tu sasil halgwa alta hek dach a adi. Gwal tu tadad tis Pete, al tis sali skadi. Tu sasil tis is chachash, du klapalt. Gwal tu sasil tis is lok, du shakalt. Tu a tis wards al tis shakabats, a tis squaquatach. Gwala tu a tis all to klep. Tu a tis auditorium, yuf T occupational therapy, all, yuf tis squadit sud alt, yuf tis acid alt. Sufa sel ti klus och schalgwa, twalta acid alt, gwal klu acid buk slachel. Altis occupational therapy all. Gwal tu hoyachi bid halgwa. Klu och halgwa twatis kwadit sud alt. Buk ha. Buk slachel klu kas halgwa. Gwal klu tsak disab. Gwal klu tsagwat sud. Gwal tsakade. O la labtab halgwa at sis nurse. Hoi o tadsut halgwa twa cod liver chas. O lacheladab halgwa, gwal o bulk halgwa twa tis ward, gwal o cha'a o gwadil. Hoi gwal chats bid halgwa, bib chagwal halgwa kak. O chakachab halgwa atis e qosid, da fwit gwaslab tagwals halgwa. Abilaf gwa chayab tis wiotsu gwal gwa kagwatab at sis nurse. Hoi tuch a halgwa twa tis o acids. Tilaf o tadzalaf halgwa alaf tisas lachelo. Tu och halgwa twa tis chalalt toch fwaf gwas hak gwa fwaf gwas lachdub at si tudkaya tiso lahaidufs. Dutch af at tis chacha gwa klu och halgwa twa occupational therapy gwa klu och halgwa twa tis kwadit sud alt alta pad chacha. Alti Dutch o zaladub, tut ok si tut kaya yap si pos, twa Montana. Alti so sludgils halgwa, chak quigwas bulks, twa Cushman, guati o glalab halgwa, atil alalos atil Cushman. Huit la alalos atil shads. O ala los tab halgwa atil Cushman. O bulk bagwich tis yaya atu roda twa washatab alta parats yafti chos zaladub yafti spo sachi yafti Dutcho guati huitlas yayus alta Montana. Huitwas dub atil tu tsapas. Hai o safoboch ocht tis yaya al tis tabakos twa yakima gwa o yayus atahaps. Tu sasel halgwa alta yakima twa hak patab hoi gwa la gwich halgwa twa zidzalalich gwa tilaf Bagwich hogwa twa te swa tuftwad a te Puyallupabsh al te Salas Ali. Ad Kadub a tu Rhoda tis Easts to Richard Hayward Sr. al ti Zidzalalich gula gwich hogwa twa te swa tuftwad a Puyallupabsh gula achad til Paradats Badadats hogwa. Babok twa te Cushman chasalt twa siayus al tis o lokils gwil klau bayayus al te Hawthorne Indian chalalt tu yayus bitub a Puyallupabsh. La klachwatab a tu Rhoda til badadats yaf til ebebats yaf til chabeks gwa o slaslis tiso latbuds til dutcho ak yeks o huit alich a tahas al tiso slaslios. Hai o ogos bid tabuslid chad a tidzo chalat suit bid si tu Rhoda Hayward tu hoyu chad zuf bid a ta sluf soquab a tiso atabud a tud kayat al til sali achi spakwachi zaladub yaf ti parats yaf ti tsoks o chorchod a tiso qalbs a ta chalot gulo chorchod a til so chorchod chas duf chad.
My name is Rhoda Hayward. Maiden name is Cushman. I was born at Ronan, Montana in 1930. I was raised with all my mother, my grandmother, sometimes my dad, and my other grandma was named. My first grandma was Anastasia. She married Alec Paldo. My father, Wilbur Ducharme, went to Cushman School for Indians. Then they made it into a hospital. My mother went to the Catholic school, Earthline. All of us at one time or another, went to the Indian school. We were baptized, made our first communion, and then was confirmed Catholic. It was a good school. We learned a lot about how to polish floors, work in the kitchen. I'm not sorry. I certainly not gonna forget my training. My grandmother went to Carlisle. We had pictures of them when they got off the train. They cut the boys' long hair off. Jim Thorpe went there at the same time. He was from Oklahoma. Then I was put in the earth line. We were like a dormitory. We all slept in a dormitory campus-like setting. Then, later on, me and my aunt went to Cushman. And I was not. Went to school there. Loved it. Structured. We didn't seem like we were sick at all. Then later on, I got a job at the hospital, for the Indian Hospital. They came from all over Alaska, Navajo, all the tribes went to Cushman, here in Tacoma. It was a good job. Alex, my Grandpa Alex, and his dad spoke Spanish. But Alex was already half in between. You got punished if you tried to speak in native. And you try, some kids were put in isolation. My dad and my grandmother, if they spoke any language at all, they didn't let nobody else hear them. Because they wanted to call mainstream. You gotta be like everybody else. You don't. They didn't bother the French, but then nobody spoke it. It's like the language disappeared. It was French, Spanish, Kootenai, and Salish. All them tribes were mixed up. It's like a hidden language. If they knew it, you didn't know it. They never, because it was taken out of them. Big enough to speak, talk. There was no more words left. We didn't have the language no more. It was gone. And I'm so glad to see tribes all over are getting their language. And we should have a language. It's very, very wonderful. Here we are, 5 generations, and now our languages come back. I have lived to see my granddaughter and my great-grandson speak and sing and play the drum and dance and have their own school. That is a wonderful blessing. God has been good to me on this earth. I love everybody. I'm so blessed to have my granddaughter and great-grandchildren. We can cook anything we want, say anything we want, make anything. It's a good time when we can do anything we want. I live to see my baby talk the language. I'm very grateful to be here. Amen.
Sujo ches kuku ets. Sujo ojo biti jan. Kolo chapsi grandma hey. Yeah.
My precious baby.
Shabisi Chad, Queen Hamage, Ayo Aninishnet, 8 Toothly Akui Hat, Kokolali Toothly Akui Hat, Haskuet, the Awajashik, Ishihan, Tachihila.
Queen Hamage.
Hoy chas. Twa Gualapu de Asia de Siaya Chalup. Amber Sterud Hayward Seed Stat, Spoyalapobs Chud. Uyayush Chud, Twati Spoyalapobs, Altisla La Olubadi, Yapti Twosho Tiradi. Good day to you all, my friends and relatives. My name is Amber Sterud Hayward, and I'm a Puyallup tribal member. I work for the Puyallup tribe, formerly in the Historic Preservation Department and currently in the language program. You just watched Interview with Rhoda Ducharme Hayward, Salish Tribe, the minimization of language and culture through boarding schools. In this video, you heard the story of my maternal grandmother, Rhoda Ducharme Hayward, and her experiences attending Cushman Indian Hospital and Sanatorium. My grandmother was the most important person in my life, and she's the reason I began this project. In the previous video, names were not used to protect the privacy of our tribal elders. While their words were incredibly powerful, you still didn't have a name or face to associate with their stories. However, in this video, we are sharing one person's life experiences. We are using her story as one final reminder that each of these individuals were someone's child, someone's brother or sister, someone's auntie or uncle, someone's parent, someone's grandparent. Each of them were valuable members of their families and communities. Each of them were missed when they were removed from their homes. Each of their lives and their families' lives were forever changed. I remember the first time my grandmother told me she attended Cushman Indian Hospital. I was so confused. I asked her why she came all the way to the Puyallup Reservation from the Flathead Reservation in Montana. She shared her memories with me. So many questions went through my mind. I went home and I told my mother what my grandmother said. My mother was just as shocked as I was, and she said she didn't know that information either. I went back to my office in Historic Preservation and asked my boss and tribal historian, Judy Wright, if I could start working on a boarding school project to do more research and to hear more stories from tribal elders about their experiences. She said absolutely, and she began putting huge piles of documents and photos on my desk to help me with this valuable work. I then went back to my grandmother and asked if I could record her sharing her story about boarding schools and Cushman Hospital. I asked her why she hadn't shared this information with her own children. She said she didn't think it was important enough to share. We continued talking, and she looked at photos of the Cushman school buildings where she lived for a year, and these brought up more memories. She remembered her daily routine, children's names, doctors' and nurses' names. She remembered what it was like going back home to Montana after her one-year stay at the hospital. She then went on to share about her time in the Catholic Indian boarding school in Montana called St. Ignatius. All the children on her reservation attended that boarding school, and she remembered being verbally abused daily. She remembered that her father was brought out to Cushman Boarding School from Montana in his youth. She remembered her mother attending the Indian boarding school in Montana. She remembered her grandmother getting shipped off to Carlisle Indian Boarding School in Pennsylvania. While my grandmother tried to stay relatively positive about the experience, we also talked about the negative intentions behind it all. She told me that what one man means for evil, Creator can turn it around for good. She said the American government meant to harm Indian people and meant to take everything that was dear to us. But as you heard in my grandmother's own words at the very end of the video, the intended results of the U.S. government did not prevail. She got to live to see her family grow up on the Puyallup Reservation. She got to see her grandchildren and great-grandchildren speak their ancestral languages and practice their culture. While my grandmother did her best to turn the harm that was meant for her into good, many others couldn't do the same. After interviewing my grandmother, I advertised far and wide across Indian country looking for elders who attended the boarding schools and hospital on the Puyallup Reservation. I got phone calls, emails, and had in-person visits with many tribal elders who were very willing to share their stories. Because of my understanding of what my grandmother went through, I was able to use that knowledge to carefully interview the elders. Each person I spoke to could very clearly recall their experiences. There were many stories that were similar to my grandmother's. They openly shared with me, gave their consent, and asked that something be done with this information. As you recall from the previous video entitled Stories from Students, Patients, and Staff, there were stories from these elders that were very hard to hear. Some had horrible memories of their time spent on our reservation. Some had good memories and left with lifelong friends and spouses. No matter what the takeaway was, they all had a story to share that needed to be heard. Please know that the full immersion Lushootseed video and this accompanying video has not been arbitrarily put together. Each word, perspective, story, and each question has been chosen very intentionally. This very Puyallup-centric presentation of history was very deliberately compiled to make you see us as human beings who have a story to share. By centering our story right here in our homelands, you have to connect through us through geography and specific stories shared. We're trying to make it hard for you to disconnect from us. We've all heard the blanket statements regarding the Native American experience in the United States. These blanket statements still allow for you to detach from our stories. We want you to know that these things occurred right here to our people on the Puyallup Reservation in Pierce County, Washington, and the effects of this history still has an impact on our community today. We thank you for your time, and we mostly thank you for considering personally reflecting on this video, the questions, and broadening your awareness for others in your life, because we all want to be seen as human beings, to be acknowledged, and to be accepted. If you'd like to dig deeper or would like more time to process these concepts and values, please see the accompanying document that goes with this section covering Interview with Rhoda Ducharme Hayward, Salish Tribe, the Minimization of Language and Culture Through Boarding Schools. Hoya, we are finished.